Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My family drama isn't special. Plenty of families have the golden child and the scapegoat, but the way karma played out in the end is worth telling. My mother was the responsible one. From age 12, she worked in my grandfather's shop, never asking for handouts, eventually building her own business through determination. Her sister, my aunt, couldn't be more different. She drifted between jobs until her mid-20s, regularly stole from my grandparents, and was constantly in trouble. Despite this contrast, my grandmother spoiled my aunt. This favoritism extended to my aunt's 3 children, each with different fathers, and no, her first husband wasn't one of them. It didn't matter what chaos my aunt or her kids caused. My grandmother would defend them while rarely having time for my mother or us unless she needed something. My mother only visited because she loved my grandfather. When my grandfather died in 2004, my grandmother wrote a new will a few months later. Both my mother and aunt were present when she signed it, so they knew what it contained. The will said that when she died, the house would be sold with 25% going to my mother, 25% to my aunt, and the remaining 50% divided equally among all the grandchildren. The house was valued at more than £500,000, a nice inheritance, but not life-changing money. In 2010, my mother died in an accident without an updated will. She didn't have much, no business anymore, and she was renting a house. What she did care about was her funeral arrangements, which she had shared with me. Specific music, flowers, coffin color, and a request for attendees to wear bright, warm colors. When she died, my aunt and grandmother took over the arrangements and tried to change everything I'd told them. They picked songs my mother disliked, wrong-colored flowers, and a hideous coffin. My siblings and I managed to restore some elements, but the coffin couldn't be changed, and my grandmother refused to let people wear bright colors, insisting on traditional black. It was frustrating. After the funeral, my grandmother changed her will. My aunt told us she had no involvement in drafting it, and my grandmother said she'd changed it so my mother's share would go to her children. Us. We thought that was reasonable, but after my mother died, my grandmother stopped talking about her. At first we thought it was grief, but even 5 years later she changed the subject when my mother was mentioned, usually to discuss my aunt's problems or her annoying children. When I tried to talk about my own problems, including a breakdown after my mother's death, she'd twist it to say that my cousin had suffered worse than I had. My grandmother died in 2016. Her funeral instructions were nearly identical to what she'd arranged for my mother, same music and everything. It was like she'd used my mother's funeral as a practice run for her own. Months passed, and we waited to hear about the will reading. My aunt kept saying we needed to wait another month. I wasn't concerned about the money, but my oldest brother wanted to use it for his honeymoon, and my younger brother was starting university, so it would have helped. My father ran into my grandmother's solicitor and asked what was happening. The solicitor told him that the will had already been read and everything had been left to my aunt. When questioned, he mentioned that my aunt had been there during the drafting, despite her promises that she wasn't involved. When confronted, my aunt first denied everything, but eventually admitted to lying. She showed us the will, confirming our fears. The house and all its contents now belonged to her. This included my grandfather's World War II medals, which he had promised to me before his death. I asked her if I could at least have my grandfather's medals, since he had promised them to me. She told me that unless I had this promise in writing, I would get nothing from the house. She added that she had already given the medals to her son Clive. Clive, her oldest son, was a mess, in and out of prison for theft and drug dealing. I knew those medals were already sold. We looked into legal action, but lawyers told us we'd likely get nothing. My aunt listed the house for nearly £750,000. She'd made too many enemies in our town, so her plan was to sell and move closer to her daughter in a larger city. She received an offer and put a deposit on a house near the city. Then karma stepped in. The buyers ordered a survey of the property, which revealed big problems. The land was too soft for the house, which had been sinking about 2 centimeters over the 40-plus years my grandparents lived there, but now sinking 1 centimeter per year. Within 3 years, the house would need major repairs or demolition. The new value? Just £60,000. The buyers pulled out. My aunt couldn't buy her new house but still had to pay the deposit. Meanwhile, she'd let Clive move into her council housing despite his ban from council properties for trashing them. Someone reported this, and she was evicted. With nowhere to go, she was forced to move into my grandmother's crumbling house. She was stuck there for 2 years. When I saw her, she'd try to talk to me, but I'd ignore her and walk away. Once, as I was leaving, she screamed in the middle of a busy street that my mother deserved to die for having a retarded child like me. Someone reported her to the police. She received a warning and was shamed on Facebook. Each time I saw her after, she looked more miserable. Eventually, she sold the house for around £85,000 and moved in with her daughter in the city. I lost contact with her family after that. I later bumped into one of her former friends who told me what happened next. My aunt moved into her daughter's 3-bedroom house, already crowded with 3 kids. She and her partner took the smallest room while she looked for work and housing. Even with £85,000, she couldn't afford a home in that area. After about 1 month, her partner emptied her bank account and disappeared. Stranded in her daughter's house, she contributed nothing because she spent all her money on bingo. Eventually, they had a big argument where my aunt told her daughter that she should have aborted her. Her daughter kicked her out. So there was my aunt, alone in an unfamiliar city with no money, no home, and her last relationship ruined. Last I heard, she was living in a caravan in the city's roughest area, unable to work due to early onset arthritis that had crippled her hands. When I was in my 20s, I had the chance to live away from my hometown in this semi-rural area. The neighborhood was small, around 30 homes with spacious properties and plenty of greenery. We shared some expenses for road maintenance, but nothing like those homeowners associations you hear about in America. My next-door neighbor was a wonderful lady in her 50s, smart, funny, and a great cook. Her boyfriend would visit every weekend, though he couldn't help much with yard work due to back problems. I often took care of her garden alongside mine. It wasn't a big deal for me, and after all the delicious food she shared, asking me to try her cooking and tell her if I liked it, it seemed fair. Her 2 dogs would follow me around while I worked. Eventually, she and her boyfriend decided to move several hundred kilometers away and get married. I was sad to see them go, but happy for them. Before they left, they gave me some items they couldn't take, including a cast iron pan I kept. The house went up for sale, and I remember when the couple who eventually bought it came for their first viewing. I was working in the garden but didn't pay much attention. Later, I remembered the woman had a distinctive high-pitched voice, and her husband was much taller than her, nearly 2 heads taller. When I learned the sale was final, I tidied up the garden so it would look nice for the new owners. They moved in without saying hello, which was fine. Not everyone is sociable, and I respect that if they're not bothersome. A couple of days after they moved in, I was working in my yard, cutting grass and trimming some dried plum tree branches when the woman called out to me. In her high-pitched voice, she told me to come work on their yard after I finished with mine, saying their grass was overgrown and they had other tasks that needed doing. I was confused at first, but then realized she must have seen me gardening for the previous owner and assumed it was my job. I walked over and told her that I was just maintaining my own property and that I had helped the former neighbor as a friend because her boyfriend had back problems. She just said okay and went inside. 3 days later, we had our monthly neighborhood meeting. After talking about some issues with the dirt roads, the new neighbors brought up a complaint. The woman with the high-pitched voice said I was refusing to do my chores, suggesting I should be punished and not paid in full. I was about to respond when another homeowner spoke up. He told everyone I had never been paid for any gardening work and that I didn't work for any of the neighbors. I had simply been helping my former neighbor as a friend. I added that I had already told this to the woman the other day explaining my relationship with the previous owner and her boyfriend. The tall husband then said that when they visited the house, they had seen me doing gardening work and assumed it was included in the common expenses. He said they had bought the property thinking this. I found the situation ridiculous. I told them I was sorry they thought my gardening services came with the house, explaining that my work came free with the friendship I had with my former neighbor, and nothing more. I said no one had told them I would be working for them without charge or as part of common expenses, and that they were simply wrong. That's when the woman lost her temper. She began shouting that I was disrespecting her husband and his authority, calling me rude and a bully, and saying I was refusing to do their gardening. Her shouting was followed by a long silence. Our meetings had always been friendly and quiet, so this outburst was shocking. I broke the silence by asking them to explain how I had been rude or a bully. I asked them to explain how I had disrespected her husband and what authority they thought they had over me. I said they were right about one thing. I was refusing to do their gardening, and I would never do it, not even if they paid me. The neighbors walked out before the meeting ended. The rest of us stayed talking about what happened. After, I went to visit the nice old man who lived on the other side of these neighbors. He invited me and a couple other homeowners in for coffee and tea. While there, I had an idea. I told him I could come by a couple times a week to take care of his plants and bushes and have a cappuccino while I was there. He agreed, which worked out well for me. I got good coffee, I knew it would bother the neighbors to see me gardening for someone else, and I'd get to see the old man's granddaughter who visited. Plus, he had many books he would lend me. The cappuccinos were delicious. The neighbors were angry whenever they saw me working next door, and the old man's granddaughter became a friend who introduced me to her friend who later became my girlfriend. Sadly, she died only 6 months later, but that's another story. The old man's book collection was also great. He had good taste in books and shared them with me. I was a well-behaved kid in elementary school. Good grades, participated in class, and stayed out of trouble. But 6th grade in Southern California tested my behavior because we had a ridiculous principal. Everyone called him Mr. Sir behind his back, and he ran our school like a military academy rather than a place for 10 to 12-year-olds to learn. My friends and I weren't troublemakers. We just wanted to hang out at recess, talk about video games, trade snacks at lunch, and do normal kid stuff. But Mr. Sir had other ideas about how elementary school should work. His worst rule? No groups larger than 3 people at recess. According to him, this was to prevent gangs from forming. Yes, gangs in elementary school. As if my friends discussing Pokemon cards would become organized crime. The playground proctors enforced this rule. They'd blow whistles at groups of 4 or more kids. My friend group had 5 of us, so we made a system where one person would walk away when a proctor looked our way, then come back when they were in watching. It was silly that we needed strategies just to hang out together. The group size rule was just a start. His office was near our outdoor cafeteria, which had roof coverings over all tables. The sound of children eating lunch bothered him. His solution? A noise monitor that looked like a traffic stoplight on the cafeteria wall. Green meant acceptable noise. Yellow was a warning, and red meant too loud. When it got really noisy, the red light would flash. The cafeteria was where we could finally talk after sitting quietly in class all morning, so the light stayed red most of the time. After about 2 weeks of us ignoring this thing, Mr. Sir finally snapped. It happened on a Friday. The cafeteria was noisy with weekend plans, and the stoplight had been red since lunch began. The door to Mr. Sir's office opened, and he walked out holding a bullhorn. Mr. Sir shouted through his bullhorn for everyone to quiet down. His voice made the entire cafeteria go silent. He told us we were all being disrespectful. He said the light had been red during the entire lunch period. He told us to remain silent for a full minute. We sat still, not making a sound. I watched the stoplight to see what would happen when we were quiet. The flashing red became solid red. Then it changed to yellow. A few seconds later it turned green, showing we'd reached an acceptable noise level. Then the light turned off. And then, crash! The stoplight broke free and fell to the floor, breaking into pieces. For a second there was silence. Then the entire cafeteria burst into laughter. I'd never heard so many kids laugh at once. Mr. Sir stood there, his face red. Without a word, he turned and walked back to his office, slamming the door. One of the lunch ladies told everyone to finish lunch and that there was nothing to see. She was trying not to laugh as she swept up the pieces. My friend whispered to me, asking if I saw Mr. Sir's face. He said the principal looked ready to explode. I whispered back that Mr. Sir exploded like his stoplight. We kept quiet but couldn't stop giggling for the rest of lunch. The noise monitor was never replaced. Mr. Sir never mentioned it again, and lunch went back to normal noise levels. I don't know how the stoplight fell, maybe bad mounting, or the vibrations from our voices loosened it, but I think it was karma. Mr. Sir kept his strict rules, but that day felt like a win for us kids. I was driving an old big rig across town to my friend's shop. He owns a custom truck modification business, and this vehicle was scheduled for a complete overhaul. The truck was retired from regular service, which is why it had civilian plates instead of commercial ones. This old beast had a rev limiter that capped the speed at 60 miles per hour, making it stay in the right lane on highways, where the speed limit was 65 miles per hour. The drive had been quiet, traffic was light, and I was enjoying the cruise. My friend's shop was on the other side of town and I was making good time considering the speed limitation. Everything was fine until I approached an interchange halfway through my journey. In my side mirror, I spotted headlights rapidly approaching from behind. The vehicle was moving faster than traffic. I watched as it swerved into the left lane to pass me, then suddenly cut in front of my truck. There was barely any space between me and the concrete barrier on the right side of the exit ramp, maybe 20 or 30 yards at most. I shouted as I hit the brakes hard. The car in front of me slammed on their brakes too, trying to make the exit at the last second. There was no way they could fit in that gap between my truck and the wall. I avoided hitting them, but they weren't so lucky. They clipped the concrete barrier with sparks that lit up the night. My heart was pounding. I pulled over to the shoulder and grabbed my radio to call for help. Before I could finish the call, I saw 3 people exit the damaged car and walk toward my truck. Their body language told me everything I needed to know. They were looking for someone to blame. I opened the door of my cab but stayed in my seat. Something about their approach didn't feel right, and I wanted to keep the height advantage of sitting in the truck. The first person started yelling, accusing me of causing their crash. I defended myself, explaining that they cut me off and tried to take an exit from the wrong lane. The second person jumped in with more accusations, claiming I had been swerving all over the road and they had to get around me. The third person threatened that I would have to pay for the damage to their car, insisting it was my fault. My stomach sank. I didn't have a dash cam on this truck since it was retired from regular service. It was their word against mine, and there were 3 of them. I was starting to worry when I spotted flashing lights in the distance. I pointed out that the police were coming. The trio exchanged looks and hurried back to their damaged vehicle. The first officer to arrive was on a motorcycle. He took statements from all of us while we waited for backup. I explained what happened, emphasizing that they had cut me off and tried to make an impossible exit. The officer asked why I was driving a commercial vehicle with civilian plates. I explained that the truck was being taken to a shop for overhaul and that it was legal to have civilian plates on a semi that's not in commercial service. By that time, 2 more police cruisers had arrived. The second officer joined the first, and they both seemed more interested in my truck's plates than in the accident. They kept questioning me about the registration while the third officer went to speak with the other driver and passengers. The third officer rushed toward the driver of the other car and put him in handcuffs. The 2 passengers were quickly detained as well. The 3 officers gathered in a huddle talking. After a few minutes, the first officer returned to me. He told me I was free to go, explaining that the vehicle had been stolen from a casino valet about an hour ago and these kids had taken it for a joyride. I asked if they weren't supposed to be driving that car. The officer said no and added that the driver didn't have a valid license either. He mentioned they had checked that my plates were legal for this vehicle and wished me safe travels. I felt relieved. As I got back into my truck and continued my journey, I thought about how differently things might have turned out if those officers hadn't found the truth. The next day, I installed dash cams in every vehicle I own or drive. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.